Good morning, traders, and a happy Wednesday slash FOMC day out there to everyone. Hope that y'all had a nice evening there last night, and as always, should be a nice, interesting day in front of us here. We do have at 8:30 a morning figure just for the U.S. That's going to be our PPI, having our CPI out there yesterday. And then as we continue on through the day, we will have the crude oil figure also out at 10:30 Eastern, and then lastly, of course, naturally, at 2 o'clock we have our FOMC, and then 30 minutes thereafter they have their press conference there with their Q&A. So a few items to be aware of, but for the morning session there, the PPI and the crude figure will be the two items to take into account there. But with that said, before we get into our morning data point, I can come in here to our daily charts on the ES. As we know, we put in our fourth day of low to high trading there yesterday, putting in a high test of 47.0175. And then in the overnight session, we did proceed to keep it fairly contained, but we traded up slightly higher. We put in an overnight high of 47.05 half, so still making fairly stout progress. We know as to where we stand. If I were to pull these weekly charts back into sight and basis that S&P cash, of course, that's just basis the pit session, but helps us keep a little bit of a bigger picture view as to where we stand. We're still maintaining. We closed yesterday above our previous cycle high that we had from our trading done at the very end of March of last year. So not bad as far as the progress on the SPX goes. And then of course on our ES there, basis the March contract, we don't have too many data points to be working with there. So as we know, it's been a fairly nice March. We are making some progress away as well from the 5 SMA here on the daily charts. That comes in at 46.75 and a quarter down below, so it has carried itself quite a ways. And when we come over here in a moment to look at the intraday charts, we'll see it's not really forming many signs of sell divergences or loss of momentum. But with that said, tiny Globex range, so overnight high is not too exciting up there at 47.05 half, but still, good to keep on the sheets there. So as far as the ES goes, fourth day of low to high coming into today, already having traded above the previous day's high. Down below, we'd have that 46.75 and change down below, and then just bearing in mind, basically the cash levels there as far as any further up there. So 46.37 was the cash level. We closed at 43 and change, so we still have about a 40-point premium on the futures to the cash market there. So that would really be coming in a little bit closer towards 47.15, 47.20 in case we reach up any further up basis those futures. So just nice to have additional points there. As far as the intraday data, as we can see, we've gone through a phase of positive consolidation. Our impulse that we had to the upside yesterday and essentially digesting by going sideways as opposed to giving up much ground. We also saw our waves on the 120-minute oscillator yesterday. We had one slip down to tag that 120-minute moving average and then continued to maintain their bid. So not a whole lot to fault there on behalf of the ES. And then we can move on along and take a look here at the DAX, and the DAX as well, still showcasing some nice strength. It's also on the extended run to the upside. However, we can see that in the overnight session, we have an inside range bar for the DAX. So we can certainly keep an eye on the previous day's low. That's at 16,765 basis this DAX. Also, we're doing some testing near the 5 SMA, so considering the fact that we are on the extended run in the DAX, we'd want to be aware of the 5 SMA down below. So currently that comes in at 16,789 in the DAX. So inside range bar, much needed consolidation. On the intraday data, I have the 30-minute display up here. Just have the yellow line a little bit beneath the previous day's low, just in case we do have any type of slip down. We have some zones that we could certainly do some more trading in, so viewing 16,747 as being more of a caution area in the case of the DAX, but outside of that, for now, they're doing a fairly good job of keeping themselves maintained. So that's where we are there on the ES and the DAX, respectively. Then we want to move on along to our currency spectrum here, including that of the EC, the euro currency. kind of include some more data. We know yesterday they had a bit of an upside response from the inside range bar, just didn't necessarily close at the upper end of the range, so they left a tail area. So in this EC, we have a tail from yesterday to consider, as well as the tail from 2 days ago that we had left it down below. So we're kind of stuck in the middle as far as the EC goes, just on the daily bars. So the tail from yesterday is a little bit of a ways up there, 1.08325 in the euro currency, and then of course we have the overnight low 1.07750, which ties in once again with previous, recall looking at the 1.07745, our previous reaction high. So just to take into account, we have been trading 3 to 5 days around that previous cycle that we had there in the case of the euro currency. So on the dailies, that's more or less the feel. And then as we come over to the 240, it'll give us the same idea with the tail area that we had left it down below after, filling in some more work from the impulse bar to the upside that we had. And then likewise, I'm kind of viewing these as a bit of a window here. So the tail area from yesterday, 82.15 up to 84.35. This is a bit of a zone there in case we do have any type of further response. Those would be little areas to see how the market would respond. And then likewise, just similar to how we have in the DAX, what would be the caution zone, or what would change that line of thinking, is if we came down and started to breach on the other side of 1.07270. That wouldn't be very constructive there for the euro currency, but for now, keeping itself maintained, trading inside of yesterday's daily bar, and you have a bit of a tail there to keep in mind. And then we have our lovely gold here, also a fairly decent mover yesterday. Can blow this one up a notch. Interestingly, though, even though gold had some good action yesterday, it wasn't quite enough to take out the previous day's low at the time. So we had rather, an inside range bar on the gold yesterday. And they did come down overnight and trade below 1991.2. So we put in a slightly lower low. And as to where we stand, blowing up this daily chart, if viewing this also as if this were, intraday data, this would also kind of remind us of like the inside pocket area that we've seen from Damon's charts in the past as we've come down. It's not quite down to the inside pocket, but essentially we're testing back inside this area where we had put in this previous cycle low in the gold. So inside range bar squeezed out slightly lower overnight, but we are testing into some pretty good zones of interest as far as the gold goes. There's 1985, 1988 all throughout that area. Basis the daily charts would certainly be of interest for us. We can also note that the 2-period rate of change has been flipping up, but not really giving us that greatest feeling of any type of testing to the upside. So with that, we come over here to the 240-minute display, and we have, for one, the overnight low marked off there, the 1987.3, and in case we were to slip down any further between 1987.3 and 1979, those would be initial supportive zones for the gold. And then lastly, what we would want to keep an eye out for is just to see if we see any type of ripening up on this 240-minute oscillator, starting to showcase a hint of loss of momentum. But we'd really need to see this gold prove itself and hold that overnight low before kicking in too much progress there to the upside. But still, like viewing or keeping that 240-minute chart in the back of the mind there, just noting the configuration on that oscillator. So that's where we are with the GC there. For now, just up 3 points there, and trading not too far off from where we closed or settled during yesterday's action. And then lastly, we have the crude and the bonds here before we get to our morning data point. And here with the crude, as we know, good range expansion bar down through the 5 SMA yesterday. And to couple with the fact that we were able to trade below the previous day's low. So crude had been fairly well behaved with respect to that. 68.22 was the PD low, so we certainly traded quite a bit deeper. Trade down to 67.71. So as we come back up, for one, we'd be dealing with all the work that we put in from yesterday, as well as 70 even, which is where that 5 SMA comes into sight there for the crude. And on the intraday data, We could even drop this down to be more like an hourly chart here. And what we have going on here, as we know, this was what we had unfolding yesterday, filling in some of the action from our heavy selling pressure that we had on the crude. And we resolved down, right, clearly making the lower low, and this is a little unfortunate, but we're kind of working off some of this buy divergence on the hourly crude already unfolding here in the early morning session. So oftentimes with the loss of momentum, the proxy for reversion to the mean would be our hourly moving average. So we've been able to work just briefly on the other side of that, the 68.80, which was also previous cycle low. So not a bad look for them. The only issue is that they've already reverted to their mean. So as far as any further up, what we would be running into is still some of this action that we had from yesterday's selling wave here in the crude. So this will be another one that will show up quite nicely there on the market profile view, because it'll show the nature in which we came to the downside yesterday in that early morning session. So on the counter reactive lift, we have plenty of points of interest to bear in mind from our trading during yesterday's action in the crude. And then lastly here, we have our bonds, the 30 years. And with these bonds, we can jump out, be more so on the 120-minute display. With the bonds yesterday, we were able to trade back above briefly. The 5 SMA on the daily did not close up there, but we did trade above it intraday. So in the Globex session, we are also keeping it as an inside range bar, but not too bad. We had our 2 to 3 days of high to low action. So yesterday they tried to put in some low to high work. It's just a matter that they didn't close up there. We did have our auction yesterday to help add to a little bit of the fuel as well. So when we come to the 120-minute data, the tail from yesterday is going to stick out to us there, of course. So we're slowly kind of doing a little work inside there, but what would change in these bonds here if we had some adverse reaction and started to come back down? Viewing this 118.09 as being a good zone of interest for the bonds, down below, and of course, and then really up above, we're essentially just be dealing with the tail up there at 120.09 basis, those 30 years. And then also, as you know, I always like to take a quick peek at the yield view of things, right? So we can do that with both these dailies and our intraday charts. So what we had going on here with the yields, a little shy on trading up into previous gap zone that we had at 4.383, and then on the same token, of course, we're opening inside of the previous day's range. So not too bad there on the yield view, just opening a little bit beneath the 4.3% mark on basis those 30 years. So gives us some nice areas to kind of be aware of. But with that said, want to get our charts back in order here, so we have plenty of time here before our morning data points to get everything kind of settled in and geared up here for ourselves. So we'll let that play out for us and see just as to what we have lining up for our early morning session in front of us. And once again here, I'll just leave up our ES over here. We have the cash level that comes in a little bit further up above. That would be closer towards like 47.15 in case we have any, crazy reaction from our morning data point there. And then likewise, we have our points of interest from yesterday's trading still well intact there. So let's dial it back, let this morning data point come out, and see what we have lining up for the day in front of us.